Joining us right now on the phones, Texas State Senator Charles Perry. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Appreciate you coming on today to talk about this first week down in Austin. I know it's not a lot gets done the first week. It's a lot of looking at rules and a lot of pomp and everything else. But how was the first week down in Austin, Texas?
I'd say it this way: a lot of stuff gets done behind closed doors the first week, trying to negotiate bill positions, and people are finally reading what you filed and come with their concerns or affirmations, and then you get a lot of people walking through the office going, "Hey, I need this bill filed. Can you look at it?" And that's usually a bad sign. if they're still shopping a bill legislation, sometimes you pick them up. A lot of them are district specific, but it is busy. It's just not busy to the public. You know, you're right. The pomp and circumstance and some of the just things you got to do to set up the session for operation is what we went through. So, strange week always. It's kind of I tell people it's not the most productive use of oxygen, usually that first week or two, but then we get rolling and committees are assigned. I fully expect Governor Patrick will have the committee assignments by the end of this week. He's not one to let the dust settle. So I think we'll know what our assignments are going to be, and next Tuesday's a light week because of inauguration of Martin Luther King, but the following Monday I think you're going to see session ramp up pretty fast. Any
committee that you're angling for?
I would expect to keep the same ones I had. Speculation on me adding one more, which would be 5, and that's really close to 50%. They're all heavy committees. The ones I'm on require a lot of detail and expertise, add a lot of detail, big issues for the state. So, my boat's fairly loaded, but I welcome any opportunity to serve in a different capacity, choosing what the governor does. But I don't expect seeing a lot of committee assignments change at all. Had a good session last session, had some freshmen in some key positions. I was fortunate to garner a chairmanship in that role, and there's so much in-depth knowledge to know. You don't gain anything by having major transfer of chairmanships in those committees. So I don't expect a big change. Senate's pretty stable.
How much friction is there going to be between the House and Senate in this session, do you think?
The good news is, and I don't know that, there's a healthy internal tension between the chambers, and there needs to be. That's the way the system's designed. But I think the politics of the day is different than it was even last session. So having a 150-0 vote over on the speaker side shows that they're a little bit more focused on moving things out that need to be done. And I think you'll see the Senate, not because it's a House-Senate competition. We just get things done quicker. Our rules and our processes and our procedures in the Senate are different than the rules in the House, and rightfully so, and designed to be that way. So we will, jump out there, and it won't be a competition, but it'll be just because our processes allow it. So you'll see a lot of stuff get out of the Senate early and quick, and then the House will pick those up, and they'll move through as the House does. So I don't see, or I don't sense at least, a fever, if you will, between the two chambers. Speaker Strauss has been out there publicly on similar issues that Lieutenant Governor and Governor Abbott have been out there on. So I see a little different feel. Everything's different down there every session. This one feels a little different on that front, and I think for a positive.
What are some of your bill and legislative priorities that I know you filed some pieces of legislation? What are your priorities?
I think if I had to name one, CPS/foster care/foster to adopt system, and I'm on the Health and Human Services Committee. A lot of hearings over that over the year interim period, and so that's number one in my book. We've got to deal with the lack of communication between those groups. We've got to deal with what we've asked our system to do in the way of bureaucracy and reporting, and we got to find a better way to handle the challenges out of that CPS system. So that's one. Two, I think the budget always is where we all plug in. Being on Finance Committee is awesome, and that's where you'd like to be if you can, but even in the Senate, because there's only 31 of us, you're really on Finance Committee. So I'll have a lot of interaction with that. We've got some infrastructure needs in the state with respect to earthen dams and some other things that, in my opinion, we may have kicked the can down the road too much. So I'm going to have some pretty bold initiatives as far as where we need to be setting ourselves up as a state to handle those. Probably won't see any bill drafting per se as much as more trying to work finance with riders and some other things to go forward. You got tech. Tech's always in the mix coming from out of here, San Angelo, and then there's a dental school initiative, I believe, out of the El Paso area. You've still got the vet school that people have written off. I believe that's a legislative matter to be decided. So we'll have some of those discussions. But really, and then school vouchers, obviously, are going to be a hot button in property tax reform. So served on the subcommittee for property tax reform. We need to get that right. I don't think anybody argues that there's some opportunities to make it better. On the school vouchers, we'll have some really heated and hard discussions on both chambers. Seems to be an initiative that at least Lieutenant Governor and I believe the governor, if push come to shove, would tell you he's supportive of something. So we'll see what that looks like. I filed a SB 272 that's intended to promote competition within the public schools, no different than what we see out here in West Texas. Our public schools compete for kids every day. So I've tried to transform some of that process, if you will, to the statewide level, and it seems to be gaining some attention and some support from some of the public schools around the state. So, we're going to have some really meaty issues. I'm working on some ideas on public school finance reform. I don't think we do a different public school finance reform in a session, but we need to have this session to begin the discussion on what that might look like 2 to 4 to 6 years out, because arguably it doesn't work very well. It's complicated. Let me rephrase it. It works well for the culture that we teach. The 5.2 million kids are very diverse, very, very different needs around this vast geography that we serve, but it's not very transparent, and it is extremely complicated. So if there's a better way to do it, we need to find it. You're going to see me, as well as others, I think, pitch ideas out there for consideration, but I don't expect that will be a need. And then I have 2 or 3 very significant pro-life pieces of legislation that will take hold, I hope. I've already got hearings committed by the chairman in the Senate, and we'll see where those go to. I think that one is logical and common sense. One is probably fairly controversial, and we'll have that. And then sanctuary cities, SB 4. Yeah. Probably, I don't know where the governor's going to go on emergency items. If it's not one of them, it'll rank up there pretty high with one of his priorities. So we'll get that through. And again, principle of rule of law is implied there. It's not about the immigration as much as it's about we just can't have jurisdictions around the country picking and choosing what laws they choose to implement. So that's kind of my in a nutshell. And then you'll have a whole host of 50 other bills come through your office that some may make sense and most won't, and right. Some are district specific. So you'll do your best to accommodate your district needs as well as trying to keep state policy in place.
A couple other things I wanted to ask you about, and one of them goes back to even last year. There were some comments made on this where on the House side, House Speaker Joe Strauss, and he almost made it sound like it would be a priority of his and of the House, and that was to restore funding for disabled children's in-home therapy services. Is that something that's been talked about on the Senate side, maybe behind closed doors?
Yeah, and honestly, it's unfortunate, but there's been a few people, even on the local level here, that have tried to politicize that. You do 7,000 bills, you'll vote in 3,000 or 4,000 of those bills, and 1,200 get signing. 28 million people, $210 billion budget. We do make mistakes along the way, or we do things without understanding the breadth of where all those are going to be reached. That initiative, I've been involved in it since 11. It came through 13, 15, and ultimately it was put in through a conference report where we removed some money from some of those services. I have had in-depth conversations with several of those organizations that provide that therapy. We've had that discussion internally. We've had that discussion publicly. But those cuts that actually had a detrimental effect will be restored, and I believe it'll be restored in the supplemental budget. It's something that we've got to get over in this political world that we live in now. Just because you don't hear someone reacting to something that may need attention doesn't mean that it's not being done. If we reacted to everything we're doing every day, we are a citizen legislature, and we do have other jobs outside of the legislature for the $600 a month that we get.
And y'all can do more than one thing at one time, too.
Yeah,
right?
Our bandwidth. And you know what? I don't serve on all 12 committees. I serve on 5, possibly 6 coming up. And I don't have the depth of expertise to deal with all the other issues that go around. But on this one, I'm very confident that we're going to have it. And I hope what we'll go back and review is there needs to be a differential rate, a delta differential, of where you pay more for those people that are challenged geography-wise. You know, rural West Texas, you may drive 4 hours to do your therapy. Urban, you may drive 15 minutes, or that person may come to you. So there has to be a distinguishing rate differential that will allow for us to meet our needs out here, no different. And a lot of that discussion was had, you know, a really detailed history behind how all that evolved. But if there was some unintended consequences, we're going to get that fixed. And I do think our supplemental bill is going to reflect a lot of tweaks and fixes that need to be made. But for people to have politicized that for whatever the purpose is, that are putting those families in an angst position that are already stressed with a kid in those needs, it's just wrong. And it's happened here locally, and I'm disappointed in that. I did hear you say you're going to have Mike Nassy on.
Yes.
What an awesome individual. You're not going to find a more qualified individual representing this state with respect to EPA overreach and some other things. That guy is phenomenal and a go-to guy for water and air quality and standards and stuff. But I'm thoroughly impressed, and he's really a neat guy. So.
Yeah, he's coming up here in just a little bit. One more question that I have for you. Yeah. It's about, and we're probably going to talk about this more than once. It's SB 6, the bathroom bill. There's already controversy about it. Is a lot of this from like the Texas Association of Business? To me, this is a business-friendly bill because it allows businesses to set their own policy. So why is there a huge debate over this? You know,
because TAB, in my opinion, got out too early on this initiative. I don't believe the numbers that are coming from North Carolina, and to the contrary, I've got numbers that say it didn't affect them. So, you know, statistics and data, you can make it say whatever you want it to say. But TAB got out early, really early on this initiative because they've got board members, in my opinion, that fund TAB, that support that philosophy. So, you know, you got to look behind the scenes and go to the politics of the day. I don't think that this bill does anything to the private sector. It still leaves all of those decision points up to the private sector. But when taxpayer dollars are involved, i.e. public buildings, schools buildings, and what people need to remember, I understand the bathroom label, but what this is really fundamentally about is a letter sent from the President of the United States to all public school superintendents that you will adopt this or have your freedom to reduce money jeopardized. So we were held hostage by a letter from a president that effectively put all of our public school on notice. You'll go along with this or you could potentially lose money. The state has a legitimate interest in standing in the gap between federal and local public school officials that probably at its core 99% of the people in the state would say it's not something I support value-wise. Then you bring in Title IX. This undoes Title IX. And then you rein in UIL and all the competitive issues that it brings in. And then at the heart of the matter, Senate District 28, I can tell you in full confidence, doesn't want 14-year-old girls sharing with 14-year-old boys in their public schools. So it's something the state has to do, needs to do, and should do, and will do responsibly, but it was not something the state took on as an agenda on its own. This was something that came out of the feds. So,
Texas State Senator Charles Perry, appreciate your time today. We'll visit with you throughout the session.
Appreciate you guys. Anytime, man.
Thank you. Bye. That's Texas State Senator Charles Perry.